Well, the Conservative MP for Bracknell, James Sunderland, joins me now. Morning, James.
Good morning.
So there's been some U-turns in the last weeks, months, but a law-breaking U-turn. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm not a great fan of the phrase U-turn. It applies, clearly moving from an absolute position to another absolute position. I mean, in this particular case, it's quite pragmatic. I don't necessarily agree either with the sense that we're breaking international law, but this is a recalibration of a clause in the withdrawal agreement, which is being considered for UK benefit.
But I mean, an absolute position surely is when you've signed and agreed to a contract, I would say. And Brandon Lewis yesterday said that this will be breaking international law. So how can you not agree with that?
Well, we are living in interesting times. When the withdrawal agreement was signed earlier in the year, our backs were against the wall in terms of the timeline, in terms of the pressure being heaped upon us by the European Union. And inevitably, any government worth its salt reserves the right to have a look at what's been signed, have a look at the legislation and have a look at what needs to be done. And we are continually evolving in this process. And really what's happened in this case is that the new Prime Minister and the current government has had another look at one of the clauses. It's Article 4 in the withdrawal agreement, and has realised that actually what needs to happen in this particular case is that the UK interests must come first. And the clause at the moment that says that domestic considerations must always be subordinate to international considerations leaves us open to legal challenge of the European Union, and it's the right thing to do to have a look at it.
What of Theresa May's point that this will damage trust in the UK over future trade deals? If we're just going to renege on things like this, will that not affect trust going forwards?
I mean, Theresa May, she is my neighbour in Maidenhead. She's a very eminent politician. She's excellent. Former Prime Minister. I mean, she's entirely right to raise it. But of course, we've moved on. She's very loyal to her part of the agreement, very loyal to the work that her government did. But we have a new Prime Minister. We know an awful lot more now about the unfolding shape of agreements and what is in the withdrawal agreement. And of course, the UK government does reserve the right to do what's best for the UK. So I do agree that we need to unpick an element of the withdrawal agreement and reconsider it.
But in terms of loyalty, there is fallout from this, isn't there? I mean, Sir Jonathan Jones, the most senior government lawyer, resigning. Everyone is not on the same page about this, are they?
Well, Jonathan Jones is a very eminent lawyer, and that's what he's employed to do. He was employed to give advice to the government. But as we've seen, nothing has a straight line. As we've seen with the algorithms recently with the A-levels, what's wrong with good old-fashioned political judgment? And in this particular case, the British government is employing its judgment to make a call on an element of the withdrawal agreement. And, if Sir Jonathan Jones feels the need to resign, that's regrettable. But ultimately, this is about the British government doing what's right for the British people.
So in your view, then, everything that's gone before now, they could make a call on any of that and change any of that, can't they, regardless of whether it's breaking international law or not?
Well, they won't be changing all of it because it's a good bit of work. The point I'm making is the fact that nothing is perfect, and ultimately this is one glitch that's been identified. It's been identified as a potential risk with regards to...
I can't get past the breaking international law bit. That's the bit I can't, I can understand wanting to change things and move things, but it's so significant that it's been admitted it's going to break international law. That's enormous.
Well, I think you'll find that history is littered with examples of where countries have served, self-interest. They've served the people of that country. And, while I do not necessarily agree that any country should break international law, Brandon Lewis yesterday in the House was gracious enough to say that it was in a very minor and specific area, and I trust him.
Yeah, but I've broken into somebody's house, but I only cracked, the side window, so it was only in a minor way. You've still broken in the house, haven't you? There's just sort of playing around with the words.
Yeah, well, you're clearly pushing me quite hard. I'm not going to budge on this one because at the end of the day, I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily support any breaking of international law. But when it comes to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get this right, when it comes to regaining our sovereign powers from the European Union, when it comes to doing what's right for the British people and the British government, I'm afraid in this particular case, he's probably right.
What do you think needs to happen then at this point?
Well, today we've got another interesting day in Westminster. I'm just off there shortly. We have the internal market bill being presented to the House, which again will be unpicked forensically by the MPs. There'll be a vote at some point, maybe later today or perhaps next week. And again, it's a good bit of work because what it does, it establishes how powers currently held by Brussels will be devolved across the four home nations. And again, what it basically means is the fact that the home nations will again get more powers than ever before. 70 new powers being given to them on everything from labelling, agricultural produce to farming, scientific regulations. So it's a good bit of work, and I'm sure it'll be voted through.
And if we leave without a deal, if we end up leaving without a deal, thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not advocating at all that we leave without a deal. I think a deal would be good, and that's clearly my preferred approach. But what I would say to you is that there's been an awful lot of hysteria in the media about leaving without a deal. But what it means is this: we are currently a net importer of European goods. So it's in their interest for us to get a deal. We are pumping huge sums of money across to the EU and getting, a percentage back, which is only a small percentage. We've lost control of our waters, our borders, uncontrolled immigration. My honest take on this is the fact that the British government is doing its very, very best to get the EU to sign up to a deal which is mutually beneficial. And if the EU doesn't play, then we'll have no option but to go to WTO rules. And that's not necessarily a bad place to be in exchange for our sovereignty.
And this, putting in this deadline of October the 15th, is that a good thing to really sort of crank the pressure up?
Well, I think it is a good thing because ultimately, we're in the transitional arrangement at the moment that ends at the end of this year. 15th of October gives us barely 6 weeks to put the legislation through. So we're working really, really hard. I've got complete faith in the government. We've got the best brains on this. And I really hope, as a Member of Parliament, albeit a humble backbencher, that the European Union, takes the opportunity of getting this right for mutual benefit.
Good to speak to you and good to get you back there on the line. Conservative MP for Bracknell, James Sunderland there. Right, 7:46. What's happening on the roads?